I'm noticing a very uncomfortable phenomenon, and it's this conversation. My friend asks, how do you know so-and-so? I say, oh, he's my friend. She says, that's so funny. I went out with him once. He was either shitty to me on a date, sent me unsolicited nudes, made me feel uncomfortable while we were hooking up. Oh, but I shouldn't have told you that because you're friends. Like, I don't want you to think badly of him, and I'm sure he's a really great guy. The way that men interact with women in romantic scenarios is actually very indicative of their character. And if a man is not doing everything in his power to make sure that women are not fucking uncomfortable around him, he's probably not that great of a dude. I will die on that hill and I will block him if you ask me to. Thank you very much.
That was really hard to watch. That's so ironic that she's talking about making people feel uncomfortable. I guess what's quirky and like fun to some people, to others is like really awkward and cringeworthy. Okay, style aside, let's talk about the substance of what she's saying. Is she right? Do men have an obligation to do everything in their power to make sure that women are not uncomfortable? Is that their responsibility? Or is this some kind of weird gendered sexism where we're expecting men to be codependent, to take responsibility for a woman's emotions because, I don't know, we're assuming that women can't take responsibility for their own? If you go on a date with a woman and she is uncomfortable, whose fault is that? Whose responsibility is it? Is it his responsibility because he's the man, or is she responsible for her own emotions? But before we get to that, I want to thank Tiege Hanley for sponsoring this video because it's a surefire way to make a woman feel uncomfortable if you turn up to a date with really terrible skin. Every single day, your skin is under attack from chemicals, from particles, from light, and all these things that contribute to the aging process. And of course, like diet and exercise are really important, but you also have to be unclogging your pores from the outside. Your skin is really important because it makes up most of what your appearance is. Like when people look at you, they're looking at your skin. That's where Tiege Hanley comes in. These guys make a highly affordable, high quality product, and it's not difficult to use. Tiege Hanley's starter pack gives you everything that you need. You've got your AM cream, your PM cream, you've got your daily face wash, you've got your facial scrub to get all the dirt off your face. You don't even have to think because Tiege Hanley provides you with very detailed instructions telling you when to apply it and how much. It's perfect for the lazy man, and if you live inside the United States, they'll even ship it to you for free. These guys have been sponsoring my channel for a while now. I love the product. I use the product personally myself. The starter box is just $30. And because you're a member of my audience, when you click on the link in the description box, not only are you going to get Tiege Hanley at the best possible price, but they're going to throw in a free additional welcome gift. So if you want to sort out your skin, check out Tiege Hanley. Okay, so is it your job to make sure that a woman feels comfortable when you're on a date with her? I want to start off by telling you a story from my personal life. Years ago, I met a woman for a date. We met in the park and then we went to this restaurant and we had a really great time. She was very sweet, very feminine woman, genuinely curious, asked me lots of questions. We had a little kiss at the end. So things went really, really well. But when I came time to trying to set up the second date, I had this idea in my mind that I wanted to take her on an adventure. I wanted to go to this place and this place. And I was like, I planned it all out. And so when I was texting with her, I was like, hey, let me pick you up from your place and we'll get started from there. And she was like, hey, do you mind if we meet in like a public place? That all sounds great. I just feel more comfortable, meeting there. In my youth and in my stupidity, I took that personally. I was like, didn't we have a good time on our first date? You don't want me to see where your house is? Like, don't you trust me? I've planned this whole adventure, for you. That is not a pleasant memory. I'm not happy with how I handled that because there was really no reason at all to take that personally. Who knows what her past has been with men? She's probably dated, a couple of absolute scumbags. And the fact that she's a little bit cautious, like she wants to meet in public before she gets to know somebody, that's actually a good sign. That indicates that she respects herself, that she values her own safety, that she's cautious. That's a trait of a high quality woman. Obviously, one date is not enough to know whether or not somebody is trustworthy, but my ego, my pride, whatever it was, I took it personally. Now that's stupid because fundamentally you should, as a man, want the woman that you're spending time with to feel safe. And from a purely practical perspective, it makes a lot of sense to be paying attention to how she's feeling and making adjustments to your plans to make sure that she's always feeling comfortable. So for example, if you take her out to your favorite bar, but it's a pretty rough place, it's really loud or whatever, and she doesn't feel comfortable, you should be aware of that and you should suggest a change of locations. Or maybe you're the kind of guy who rides your motorcycle everywhere. You love that lifestyle, but when it comes time to asking her to hop on the back with you, she's like, I don't feel safe. I've never been on one of these before. Okay, fine, no worries. Your safety is important. I want you to feel comfortable. We'll catch an Uber instead. Or let's say you go to a restaurant and there's a couple at the table next to you that's arguing and it's really, really tense. Now, as a man, a little bit of tension in the air doesn't bother you because, you can take care of yourself. But maybe she doesn't feel safe being around that kind of hostility. And so you should take notice of that and then make the offer to switch tables or go to a different location. I think it's a real tragedy that society seems to be throwing out all the traditional gender roles, because I think that idea of a man generally looking out for a woman, taking a sense of responsibility for her safety, I think that's really sweet. As a man, when you're escorting a woman out and around town on a date, I do think that it is your role to take care of her. But here's the distinction that so few men understand. It's quite nuanced, so really listen here. As a man, it is not your job to make sure that she feels comfortable, but it is your job to make sure you are taking all reasonable steps to ensure that she feels comfortable. As a man, you should be doing everything reasonable to make sure that she feels safe and comfortable. Absolutely. But you're not actually in control of whether or not that's effective. You can't control her feelings. That's why a woman can't reasonably say to a man, it is your job to make sure that I feel comfortable. He can't be responsible for her emotions. That's codependence. You can only do so much. You're not a mind reader. She has to take responsibility for her own emotions. Like, you can do all of this, but she has to meet you halfway. Like, if, for example, you go to a restaurant and she happens to see her ex-boyfriend who is abusive to her sitting at the bar and she's obviously uncomfortable. Well, yeah, if she tells you about that, then you can take action. But unless she actually volunteers that information, identifies the discomfort and communicates that, then you can't be responsible for her emotions. And this is true for a million different responses or triggers that she might have as an individual. You can be doing everything reasonable to make sure that she feels comfortable, but if she's got some personal stuff going on relating to her emotions, she needs to volunteer that information to you so that you can take the appropriate action. Otherwise, you're just blindly walking through the dark and she's blaming you for knocking into the furniture. It is such a red flag when women expect men to be mind readers, with some kind of rationalization like, oh, well, he should be able to tell that something was wrong. He should just know. It's such a twisted perversion of what started as something beautiful, that sweet masculine protectiveness, like, yeah, I'm going to keep you safe. But then all of a sudden, it becomes an obligation and he is deserving of judgment and punishment if he doesn't get it right, even if I make his job impossible to do. It's so messed up. Do not tolerate it. If any woman ever tries that, you should just know what I'm feeling, or you should know that this is a problem. I shouldn't have to tell you. She tries any of that nonsense, really take a hard look at whether the relationship is worth pursuing. Remember, you are not responsible for making sure that the woman feels comfortable. You're responsible for being sensible. You're responsible for doing everything reasonable, but the rest of it, that's on her. It's her emotion after all. It's her discomfort. She has to be responsible for it. It makes no sense to make you responsible for that. She's an adult. She can communicate her thoughts and her feelings, and any expectation that a woman shouldn't have to do that somehow that's beyond their capacity is frankly sexist. And you will encounter some women whose level of discomfort around dating or men is just so extreme that there's really nothing that you can do. You can be doing what's sensible, what's reasonable. You can be doing your absolute best, and it's still not going to be enough. That's a situation where it's absolutely clear that the fact that the woman is not feeling comfortable around you, that is not your fault. You've got to know when to cut your losses. Like with that story I told you at the beginning of the video where I didn't go on the second date with her. That fizzled out to nothing. She went on holiday for like 3 months and I never followed up. I just moved on. But imagine if, say, after 5 dates of meeting her in public, demonstrating to her that I'm a trustworthy guy, everything goes well. Say after 5 dates, she's still like, no, I still don't want you to pick me up. I don't trust you. I don't think I'm ever going to. I can't let you know where I live. Well, at that point, when you've done everything reasonable and she's still feeling uncomfortable, you can't continue to take responsibility for that emotion, because otherwise you're playing into her delusions. You are being codependent. And from a practical perspective, you just can't be in a relationship with a woman who has that kind of trust issues. Do you see how dark the path is if you start to walk down that road of actually taking responsibility for her emotions? Like after 5 dates, is she still like, no, I need you to do this and I need you to do that, all to make me comfortable. And you're playing along with that like, oh yeah, that's completely reasonable. Whatever you like, so long as your emotions are safe. At that point, you have taken ownership of her feeling of discomfort and you're responsible for it. But do you see the precedent that you have set? If her discomfort is the standard by which the legitimacy of your actions are now being measured, then she can justify asking you to do anything. And that is how relationships turn abusive. That is the inevitable outcome of a codependent dynamic. It always turns abusive. It has to be that way because it's fundamentally at odds with reality. The only person that can properly integrate all of their emotions is that individual. And so when you've made another person responsible for those emotions, you have set them an impossible task, which is why it always breaks out into fights and arguments and conflict. Of course it does, because that person's never going to measure up. It's impossible. And here's why the tone of that clip at the beginning of this video really worried me, is because culturally, it feels like we're moving in the direction where our whole society is codependent, where men are responsible for all women's emotions. I understand that women feel uncomfortable around men, especially on the first date or when they're first meeting a man. I'm not disputing that. And to a certain degree, it actually makes sense. You know, biologically, men can be a lot physically stronger, men are more prone to violence, and if you ask a lot of women, they'll probably point to some negative experiences that they've had with men that contribute to their fears. All of that's legitimate. Now, I also happen to believe that there's a lot of cultural propaganda, and male shaming, which drums up and encourages fear of men amongst women, which I think is unrealistic, and we discount the amount of actually genuine, decent guys out there. But regardless of whether or not the level of discomfort that women are feeling is justified, the fact is that it's there. And then the next question is, okay, well, who is responsible for collective women's discomfort? Is it those women themselves or is it men? The answer is that individual woman. Her emotions have to be her responsibility. That's it. End of discussion. I really think you need to draw a line in the sand there, because you can't play into this delusion just a little bit and not have it have negative consequences come down in the future. Because if women actually believe, and they're supported in that belief from men, that their feelings of discomfort are men's responsibility and men need to solve that feeling for them, then they can justify demanding anything from men. That's kind of what we're seeing in our current dating market, in our society, and that's not good. We cannot hold a woman's emotion, her level of discomfort, as a standard by which to judge the legitimacy of male behavior. We just can't. The reasonableness of male behavior needs to be determined by fact, by logic, by evidence. It can't be judged by her emotions. It is such a dangerous precedent to set. Do not go there. As a man, you do what is reasonable, and after that, your obligation has been fulfilled. If the woman you're dating is not capable of meeting you halfway, if she wants to make you responsible for her emotions, then you've got to say goodbye. I promise you, those codependent seeds that she is planting right now will grow into a full abusive tree. More than that, because you consented to this, she will feel justified in trying to control you. As men, it is a reasonable expectation that we do what we can to try and make sure that the women in our company feel comfortable with us. Whether they do feel comfortable, though, that's on them. Have you ever had the situation where you get a girl's number, you text her, and you get a bad response or no response at all? Why is that? Why don't women respond to men after giving their phone numbers? What's the explanation? This is what my latest video is about, and there are 3 different reasons I go into them. So if this is a phenomenon you've encountered, you want some answers about this, I highly encourage you to sign up to my Patreon and get access to this video. My Patreon's just $5 a month. You get instant access to that video plus every other video in my back catalog, about 200 videos at this point. Tremendous value, great community, great way to support the creator. I'd love to see you over there so that you can be a part of it.